Well, hi, and welcome to Afterthoughts with Kaylee and
Aiden.
This week you preached on Jesus.
Yep.
So good. Which I actually genuinely mean that. I'm not being sarcastic. This, for those that don't know, I was away this past week doing a course. And I was sitting under Daryl Johnson, and he went through the entire book of John, and it was so rich and so deep. And then this week you went through John 10.
Yeah.
As we chatted about Jesus, and we're reminded about him being the good shepherd, which just felt so like all the threads tied together, which was cool. For my heart anyway. So selfishly, thanks. Can you give us a recap of what you said?
So we're in a series covering the Trinity. And so this week, yes, we're on the Son or Jesus. Last week was the Holy Spirit. And so I started off my sermon by talking about a movie that I can't recommend because I've never seen it. I've only seen this scene because in like the filmmaking world, it's considered to be a very well done scene for the movie. And it's essentially a family having lunch at a ski resort. They're outside looking at the mountains, and then a planned explosion goes off to kind of clear out some snow so there's not an avalanche, and the snow falls towards them. And as it comes closer, people begin to realize this thing's going to hit us. That's what it seems like. And so there starts to be this panic and tension in the scene, and people start to run, and the entire screen goes white. Eventually, everything kind of settles, and people return back to their seats and are kind of like, wow, that was really close. I'm surprised how close that was. And I asked the congregation if they noticed anything, and hopefully, because we filmed this before, someone did notice. If not, I'll point it out that in the scene, the dad actually completely abandons his family during all of the chaos, that it's easy to miss it, but he completely leaves the table and leaves his family to die, essentially, as far as he was concerned. And the rest of that movie, from my understanding, is actually about that, and about how he's someone who is not a reliable dad who will abandon his family, and the tension that they face on this ski trip because of that. And so it kind of sets up the whole thing of the movie. And I wanted to use that as an illustration of Jesus, and specifically how that's actually the opposite of the heart of Jesus. That many of us know people or feel that people are that way towards us in our lives, of when chaos comes or hard things come, there's like an inward thing of wanting to retreat and run away and flee. And Jesus' heart is actually the opposite of that. And we're going to talk about him specifically, which is the main idea, is that Jesus is the good shepherd, that he's not someone who just runs away from his sheep when trouble comes, but he's someone who actually is reliable and dependable and will be there for them. And so we looked at the passage in John chapter 10 where Jesus talks about him being the good shepherd. And especially in this series, I wanted us to look at how the Trinity reveals itself. And so specifically here, then, how does Jesus reveal himself and his character? It's less about let's do like a theological analysis, and more like let's do like almost like a hard analysis from them of how they see themselves. And so I felt like this passage was pretty helpful in understanding the heart of Jesus. And so essentially Jesus starts off by talking about him being a door, and funny enough, people actually don't even get what that means, and Jesus has to retell what he's trying to say again because people get confused. But he talks about there being a sheep pen where sheep are in, and that Jesus is actually the door to that pen where sheep are able to enter and leave through it. And sheep had to leave during that time because there wasn't running water and things like that. So if sheep needed to go and eat or get a drink, shepherds would have to lead their sheep out to go and survive, essentially. They couldn't just stay in the pen. But Jesus talks about himself as the door, and that he's the one who can lead us into the pasture that we're looking for, which might bring into mind for some people like Psalm 23 and stuff, if you know that psalm. And he refers to himself in that way, and that there are some people trying to hop over the fence or trying to get it in a different way, and those are people who actually are up to no good, that someone who actually is where they're supposed to be and in line with the shepherd and actually leading the sheep will come through the door, and the people who aren't really trustworthy. But I really wanted to highlight the pasture part, and specifically that Jesus fulfills the longings that we have in ourselves, that we all have these desires that we're chasing, and that we chase after other things to try to fill them. So it could be that you're looking for purpose, and so you create a god out of your job or your own success or your own image that makes you try to fill that void of purpose that actually can only be filled in Jesus. Or it could be a desire for companionship and for relationship, and that can often twist into things like pornography addiction, or using people, or even idolizing your spouse or somebody, where it's like you're turning them into a god that they actually can't satisfy the thing you're actually longing for. And there's all these different things that we grab onto and longings we have that actually can only be satisfied in Jesus. And if we just stay in our pens, eventually we're going to run out of grass and water. And we actually need a shepherd to lead us out so that we can actually be satisfied. I talked about my daughter in particular, where she's a baby, so she has a pacifier. And a pacifier, the whole point of it is that it can kind of hold you off for maybe a time, but it's not going to bring her the thing she's actually looking for when she's sucking on it. And eventually she will get upset. If she is actually hungry, the pacifier will not satisfy her because she's actually looking for milk. And that the pacifier isn't necessarily a bad thing in itself, but if she tries to use it in a way to actually satisfy that desire in her, it will be a bad thing, because it will eventually kill her, because she can't live off of it. In a similar way, that's true for us, that we as human beings have these longings and desires in us that we often try to fill with pacifiers in life, with things that aren't God. And the problem with all these things, that some of them can be even good things, but they can't satisfy us in the way we're looking for. We can only find that in Jesus. And so I quoted a quote from C.S. Lewis, where he essentially says that we have desires in us that can't be fully satisfied in this world, which probably means we were designed and created for a different world. We were created for a relationship with God. That's where those desires are fulfilled. And so I asked people what they were longing for and what those desires are that they're trying to find fulfillment in. And so then we move into the next part, where Jesus then has to re-explain himself, because people didn't understand what Jesus was saying. And he talks about himself being a shepherd, and specifically how he defends sheep. That there are wolves that come for sheep, and there are people who are running away because they're just hired workers. They're not actually the shepherd who owns the sheep, who cares about the sheep. They're people who've just been paid for a job. And so when wolves come and they go, I can either save myself or save the sheep, they go, I'll save myself, because they have no investment in the sheep. And Jesus says that he's not that. That he's someone who is invested in the sheep because the sheep are his, and that he's willing to put his life on the line for them. And he's not afraid of wolves. He's not going to run away from them. And so I talked a little bit about that concept, and Jesus not being afraid of wolves. And wolves could be false teachers or things like that. Jesus uses that imagery for false teachers often. But it could even be just a symbol for sin and Satan and evil, where evil comes for all of us. Our sin comes for all of us, whether it's done to us or done by us or done around us, that we see that. And Jesus isn't someone who's intimidated or scared by that. He doesn't get freaked out. And even to make it a little bit more personal, I said, even for us, that we live in a culture that's so scared of actually being seen by people, that we live in a social media culture, which you constantly are curating how people see you, and you're trying to present yourself in a way that you think will be most acceptable to the people around you. And we see in culture, both within ourselves, of how we've judged other people or how people have judged even us, that there are glimpses in culture where you see people have their closets opened and the skeletons come out, and they get canceled right away or pushed away, and even we ourselves push them away, sometimes with good reason, but it still, we see that in culture, and that actually kind of, we live in fear and we live in guilt and shame a lot of the time. And the thing about Jesus is that he isn't like that, that he's not going to write you off. He's not going to write other people off. He's not intimidated by the skeletons in your closet, that he actually knows all about it. And he doesn't run away from it and go, this is too much and overwhelming, you're a lost cause, but actually runs towards it.
And he doesn't say that's the label and that's the only thing that will ever be there for you.
And that's who you are. He doesn't see it like that at all. And so he's not scared of the wolves, and he doesn't run away in fear. And so I had another quote from Dane Ortland, who wrote a book that was really impactful for me called Gentle and Lowly. It's kind of about the heart of Jesus. And it was a quote where he just says that Jesus sees all the pain and all the sin and all the suffering of the world, and he doesn't relinquish in it. He doesn't go, ooh, this is too much of a mess, I'm out of here. He actually draws him in. That's his character, that when he sees that, he actually is drawn closer, not farther. And so I challenge just to question whether we actually know or believe that Jesus isn't afraid of those wolves. Because sometimes we can act or feel like maybe he is, and that he's like other people, but he's not. And then lastly, Jesus talks about how he'll lay down his life for the sheep. And he talks about specifically how he lays down his life. No one takes it from him. It's not like a wolf comes and bites him and he's like, oh no, the wolf killed me. He's like, he willingly has the power to put down his life. He also has the power to take it back up.
Yeah.
Which we know, of course, in the story of Jesus. He did both of those things. He died on the cross. He also took it back up again and rose again.
Yeah.
And you said something when we were talking about it that was interesting, where Jesus isn't a victim on the cross. He's actually someone who willingly chooses it and could have chosen to not do it. And the irony about people mocking him on the cross of like, why don't you get down there and save yourself, is that he could have.
He could have.
And he didn't. And so Jesus lays down his life for the sheep. And so I just talked about the obvious thing that's there, and that's the gospel, that Jesus is a God, the God who died for us, which at times as Christians or as people who maybe aren't Christians would have heard the story. I don't think it always hits us the way that it should, because we can get so desensitized to it, but it's crazy that Jesus died for us. It's really genuinely crazy that if there is a God who is fully good, who can see everything we've ever done, knows everything that's been done to us, knows the desires of our hearts, sees all of that, and still chooses to like love us in the most incredible way someone can, which is laying down your life for them and choosing to die for us, to save us because he loves us that much. And then he also chooses to live again and offer us that life, that that kind of great exchange of all of our guilt and shame and sin is put on him and killed on the cross, and now he offers us that life, and that we can come and find fulfillment in him if we choose to. And so I had another quote there from Timothy Keller. It's a pretty famous quote of his where he says that the gospel is essentially that you're kind of more broken and messed up than you even will ever fully realize, that there's more brokenness in you, that at times you actually even get a glimpse of it and are like, oh, that actually, and I notice this in myself when I think back to like things I said like 5 or 10 years ago. I'm like, ooh, in the moment I wouldn't have thought that, but looking back, I'm like, dude, that was messed up. You were not thinking properly. But part of the good news, which doesn't sound like good news to our culture, is that you are more broken than you even realize. But the good news about that is that even though you're more broken than you even think you are, you're actually more loved than you can even dream. That God sees all of that. And again, he doesn't run away. He doesn't relinquish. But instead he embraces you and draws you closer to him. And he runs towards you and wants to die for you and to care for you and to lead you out into the thing you're actually longing for, and to care
like
for his sheep.
Ever redeeming, where you go like, oh man, this is an ongoing redemption.
Yeah, it's not just a one and done.
Yeah.
It's constant.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it makes sense that like 10 years ago you're like, ooh, yikes.
Yeah.
Because it's like then in another chunk you're like, oh, I am growing.
Yeah.
I am becoming more like him. Like what? It's such a gift. Yeah, it's crazy.
And so, I just challenged people if they would hear the shepherd's call, that Jesus talks about how he's the good shepherd who calls his sheep, and the sheep know his voice. And even at the end of the story, you see a great example of that, where half the crowd goes, Jesus is possessed by Satan, or he's just a crazy guy. Like he's saying nonsense. Like this guy's out to lunch. And then there's the other half who's like, no, he's making perfect sense.
Yeah.
Then we're also watching him heal blind people. It seems like this guy's actually God.
Yeah.
And so even in that moment, there were the people who were actually the sheep who were hearing the call of the shepherd and hearing their voices called, which sheep would do. If they hear their shepherd call their name, they actually run to them, almost like a dog. Like a dog knows its owner and knows its voice. And when I call for my dog's name, he comes to me. In the same way sheep would do the same. And so we have that challenge as to whether we want to follow that call or not.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
I loved it. That's what I'm going to say. That's too shortly put, but also true. Okay, questions for our groups, whether you're doing this as a group or whether you're just kind of going just a little bit deeper with it on your own. My first question is actually just one that you already asked, which I find really helpful to posture ourselves before Jesus and recognize. You asked the question, what are we longing for? Or what are you longing for? So that would be my first question. What are you longing for? And then my second question, you asked the question when you were talking about Jesus defending us and that he's not afraid of the wolves. yeah, you asked, do you know that Jesus isn't afraid of the wolves? And so my question for us to discuss around that would be, how does it make you feel to hear that Jesus isn't afraid? Yeah. How does it make you feel that Jesus isn't afraid of the wolves? Can I spontaneously throw that at you? What does it stir for you?
To me, it makes me feel relieved. Like it feels calming. Both for the things around me, but also, like I talked about, the things in myself, where the world can feel so chaotic and like, oh my goodness, what's happening? And that doesn't freak Jesus out at all. And that doesn't mean that bad things don't happen. Yeah, they do. But it means that he's not afraid of it, and he is in control and is sorting things out, and that if my shepherd isn't afraid, I don't need to be afraid. Yeah. And even for the things in myself, then, like, I know myself better than anybody else knows me. There's times where I look at things I did 20 years ago, and you can still feel like, oh my goodness, I can't believe I did that. And it can weigh on you. Or even just in being a dad, for example, I'm so aware of my own brokenness and my inability to do that well. There are things that I will do well, but I'm also very aware there are things I will not do well or that I struggle with. And you can feel the weight of inadequacy. And like it's just too much in all kinds of different areas of your life, and to recognize that for Jesus, he doesn't feel that way, that he doesn't look at all that and like, yeah, you're going to be a terrible dad, or you're going to be the things in your past are too messed up. And I think it's incredibly, I don't know, it brings a peace that I don't think I would experience without Jesus, of like, the King of the universe knows all these things and isn't freaked out about them. Yeah. There's an incredible calming thing about that. It's very similar to if you're in a room full of people who are freaking out, like let's say there's a crazy thunderstorm and everybody in the room is freaking out and losing their marbles. It naturally creates anxiety in you, and you feel that stress even if you weren't feeling it before. But if you're in a room of people who are calm and are like, we know what we're doing and we're moving forward, and they don't feel anxious about it, it automatically, even if you feel anxious, will bring a level of peace to it. And it's very similar with that if the God of the universe feels that way about the world, about me, about who I am and what I am doing, and my inadequacies, it's like, oh, it brings a peace. That's very similar to kind of that room, but it's even greater because it's the God of the universe. It's not just like, and then he takes it that step further and and now I give it to you, and I give you the authority to then walk in that same. You're like, what? It's like freedom. Yeah, it's really cool. It's like relief and then freedom and empowerment. It's wild. It's beautiful. Okay, I'm fired up. Can you tell? Last question. You asked the question, will you embrace the shepherd's call? I love that because that can spin a lot of thoughts for us, in a bunch of different ways. But so maybe how I would frame it for discussion would be, what do you sense Jesus is calling you to follow him into? And I think that's it. Yeah. Thanks, Aiden. This was a rich one. And I appreciate it a lot. And I know a lot of people in the room do too. So thanks for joining us on Afterthoughts, and we'll see you next week. Okay. Bye.